The cold wind blew across the dead lands of planet Virex. Dark clouds floated low in the sky, covering the blood-red sun. Strange bones lay buried in the sand, and no birds flew overhead. This was not a place where life should exist, and yet. There it stood, a small, silent chapel made of old stone. Aliens called it cursed. They said anyone who entered never came back the same. No music came from it, no smoke from the chimney, but lights glowed inside every night. Soft and golden, as if someone lived there, watching the world. A young alien girl crouched behind a broken transport ship, her dark eyes locked on the chapel, her long ears twitching. She was not a soldier, but she worked for them. Her mission was simple: watch the human priest, learn his secrets, report back, and stay hidden. But she had already failed the last part, because the moment she arrived, the priest had turned his head toward her, though he couldn't see her in the dark. Though she made no sound, he smiled, as if he knew, and whispered, "You're not very good at hiding." She had run, heart racing, but now she was back. Something pulled her here, something deeper than orders. She had seen many strange things in her life, but never a man who healed a wounded beast just by touching it. Never someone who stood before 10 armed aliens and said, "You can fire, but the bullets won't matter." And when they did fire, nothing happened. The bullets turned to dust in the air. Now she wanted answers, but she didn't want to die. She moved closer, her boots quiet in the dust. The wooden door of the chapel stood open. Candles burned inside, flickering gently. She stepped into the doorway and saw him, the human priest, dressed in simple robes, kneeling before a strange metal cross. He didn't move, didn't even turn. He simply said, "Back again, little spy?" Her blood turned cold. She didn't speak. He stood slowly and turned. His eyes were soft but ancient, like he had seen more years than stars in the sky. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I already know your name, Trala." She gasped. No one should know that. She had never told him, never spoken to him. How? She whispered. That was the first time she had spoken to him. He walked to the bench and sat, then patted the space beside him. "Sit," he said gently. "Your legs must be tired." She didn't know why, but she obeyed. They sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You are wondering what I am." She nodded slowly. He looked up at the ceiling. "This place," he said, "was once filled with singing, laughter, prayer. Now it is just me and the dust." "You did something to those soldiers," she said. Her voice cracked. "You cursed them." "No," he said. "I offered them a chance to walk away. They chose not to, but they died," she said. "Without wounds, without reason." He looked at her, and for a moment his eyes glowed, not with anger but with light, pure and endless. They saw something they weren't ready for. He whispered, "They saw judgment." A cold shiver ran through her spine. "Who are you really?" she asked. He stood again, walking toward the altar. He picked up a small, cracked book and held it out to her. She took it carefully. The pages were warm, though the air was cold. He said, "This is the last book written by my people before they were scattered. I am the last priest of a forgotten order. And now I wait here, because something is coming." "What's coming?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned toward the door and whispered, "You are." Then without warning, the candles went out. The room was filled with silence and something more, a deep hum, like the voice of the world itself. Trala looked at him, and for a second she saw wings of light behind him, huge, glowing, and terrifying. She blinked, and they were gone. The priest was just a man again, standing quietly. "You should go," he said. "Come back when you are ready." "To remember." "Remember what?" she asked, stepping back in fear. "Who you were," he said, "and why you forgot." She turned and ran. Not from him, but from the truth that shook her heart. Outside, the wind howled louder, but she didn't stop, because something had changed. Inside her, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The silent chapel behind her was no longer just a place. It was the doorway to something far older and far more dangerous. And the priest inside was not a man. He was a nightmare waiting to be awakened. The air on Virex felt heavier now, like something ancient had begun to stir. Trala sat alone on a rooftop far from the chapel, staring at her shaking hands. They were still glowing faintly, like they remembered something her mind had forgotten. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, hadn't reported back to her command. All she could hear was the human priest's voice, soft, calm, and terrifying. How did he know her name? How did he make her see things that couldn't be real? And why did her dreams now speak in a language she didn't understand? A language that felt like it belonged to her long ago. She wrapped her arms around herself. Her people would call her mad if she told them. They would say the human priest had cursed her, but deep down she knew that wasn't true. He hadn't cursed her. He had shown her something. Something dangerous. A shadow passed overhead, and her body froze. A scouting drone hovered nearby, scanning the area. She ducked under the roof ledge and held her breath. The drone moved on, unaware she was there. But she had seen the symbol. On its side, her own division had sent it, looking for her. They thought she had gone rogue. And maybe she had, because her next steps weren't for the army anymore. They were for herself later that night. She returned to the chapel. She didn't sneak this time. She walked straight to the door and pushed it open. Inside, the priest was sitting by a small fire. He didn't look up as she entered, but he spoke. "You came back." She stepped inside slowly, her heart thudding. "Who are you really?" She asked again. He looked at her, eyes soft and tired. "I already told you," he said. "I'm a priest. Priests don't break swords with their fingers." She snapped. "Priests don't stop bullets with their breath." She stepped closer. "You made a general fall to his knees just by looking at him. That's not a priest." He smiled faintly. "No," he said. "That's a reminder." She blinked, confused. "A reminder of what?" He tossed something at her. She caught it, startled. It was a tiny kobold, rusted, etched with markings she couldn't read. But the moment her fingers touched it, the cube lit up, glowing softly in her palm. Her vision blurred, and suddenly, she wasn't in the chapel anymore. She stood in a battlefield, stars burning overhead. Ships crashed around her, smoke and fire everywhere, and beside her was the same priest, only younger, in armor made of light, holding a staff. Not a holy man, a warrior. He turned to her in the vision and said only one word, "Tryla." She gasped and stumbled back into the real world, dropping the cube, breathing hard. "What was that?" She whispered. He stood slowly, his robes glowing slightly from the firelight. "A memory," he said, "yours and mine. We met long ago before this world, before this war." She shook her head, backing away. "That's not possible." She said, "I'm only 20 cycles old." He walked toward her, calm and unhurried. "And time," he said, "is a thin curtain. Some souls don't forget, even if the mind does." She couldn't take it. She turned to run again, but this time he didn't stop her. Only whispered behind her, "The past is reaching for you, Trala. Soon, you'll have to choose who you truly are." She didn't sleep that night. She stared at the cube she'd taken with her. It glowed faintly in the darkness, calling her to remember something she had never known. And somewhere deep inside her, something old opened one eye and began to stir. The girl who had been sent to spy on the human priest was no longer sure she was still herself, or if she had ever truly been, because now she saw faces in the stars. And when she closed her eyes, she heard prayers spoken in her own voice, but in a dead language no one had taught her, except maybe him, the priest, the nightmare, or perhaps the only one who remembered the truth. ChatGPT said, the dreams no longer waited for sleep, they came to her with open eyes. Walking through the market, she would suddenly see ashes falling from the sky instead of dust. Voices that should have been loud and sharp now sounded like chanting. And every time she passed a mirror, her reflection stared too long, as if something else looked out from behind her eyes. Trala tried to keep her head down. She covered the glowing runes on her hands with long gloves. wore a hood to hide her face, but the world knew. Strangers flinched when she walked by. Animals backed away with wide, glowing eyes. And worst of all, she couldn't stop hearing him. His voice wasn't in her ears, it was in her blood, soft, deep, calm. Not speaking to her, but through her, like she had become a doorway, and he had the key. She told herself she wouldn't go back to the chapel, that she'd run, hide, leave Virex forever, but instead, her feet found the path again, drawn like a needle to a magnet, even though something inside her screamed not to. This time, the chapel was silent. No fire, no light, no sign of the priest. But the door stood open, like it was waiting for her. She stepped in slowly. The air inside was cold, too cold. And then she saw them. 3 alien generals. Strong, powerful, feared across the stars. Lying on the ground, eyes wide open, dead. But with no wounds. No struggle, no blood. Just stillness. As if something had taken more than just their lives. She backed up in horror, and a voice behind her said, "They begged." She spun around. The priest stood in the shadows, hands folded, eyes closed. They offered everything. He said, money, secrets, even their memories. But they never gave the one thing that mattered. Her mouth went dry. "What thing?" She whispered, "Remorse," he said, and opened his eyes. They were glowing again. Not with anger, but sorrow, deep, endless sorrow. "I gave them a chance, Trala," he said. "I always give a chance." They chose silence. She looked at the generals again. They had tortured prisoners, burned cities, laughed at pain. And now they were gone. Not punished by weapons, but by truth. A truth too heavy for their hearts. "You killed them," she said, not with anger, but awe. He stepped closer. "I judge them," he replied, "the same way I will judge this world, and maybe you." She stepped back. "I didn't do what they did," she said quickly. "I'm not a monster." He didn't reply. Instead, he raised his hand slowly. A soft wind began to swirl inside the chapel. Dust rose from the cracks in the floor. The candles lit themselves, and a strange circle of light began to glow beneath her feet. She tried to move, but couldn't. The air turned thick, heavy, sacred. He spoke again. But his voice was not his own. It echoed as if 1,000 voices spoke together. "Do you fear your truth?" Trala gasped. The glowing runes on her hands burned bright. Flashes of memory hit her. Screams, fire, children crying. A ruined human village, her standing over it, holding a weapon, smiling. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That wasn't me. I didn't." But she knew it was her. Another life, another version, but the same hands, the same heart. She fell to her knees. Tears burned down her cheeks. The glowing circle vanished. The wind stopped. The priest stood over her, quiet and still. And then he did something she didn't expect. He knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I don't ask for saints," he said gently. "Only for those brave enough to look inward." She looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. "What happens now?" He stood and turned toward the altar. "Now," he said, "the real test begins, outside." The sky had turned black and a storm was coming. Not of wind or rain, but of memories, judgment, and something far worse. Something that didn't just threaten the body, but the soul. And the alien girl, who once thought herself clever and strong, now found herself trembling, not from fear of the priest, but from the truth he had awakened inside her. ChatGPT said, "The storm began without warning, no lightning, no thunder, just silence, a silence so deep, even the wind refused to breathe." Trala stood at the edge of the ruins, watching the horizon crack. The sky didn't roll with clouds, it split. Thin glowing veins stretched across it, pulsing slowly like a living wound. She felt the pressure in her bones, behind her eyes, in her chest. As if the world itself was holding its breath. It had been 3 days since the judgment. 3 days since the priest showed her what she was, what she had done, and what still lived inside her. She had barely slept. She feared what she might see when her eyes closed, and now she feared what she might see while they were open. The chapel had gone dark, no fire, no glow, no warmth. Only cold stone and silence. She had returned again and again, each time hoping he would be there, each time finding only the still air. Until tonight, a single beam of white light broke through the sky, straight down into the chapel like a IA blade from the stars. No sound followed it, just heat. She stepped closer, drawn like before, unable to resist. This time, the door was not open. It was gone, melted, burned away completely. She stepped through the blackened frame and gasped. The inside of the chapel had changed. The walls were no longer stone. They pulsed like skin. The ceiling stretched high into shadows, and from above, fine ash rained slowly, falling like snow that forgot it was dead. In the center, the priest floated, his feet inches above the floor, eyes shut, arms raised, robes flowing unnaturally around him. Symbols of light circled him in slow motion, glowing symbols in no known language. And behind him wings, not feathered, not metal, but made of pure golden energy, shifting constantly. Trala didn't breathe, couldn't. Her legs felt locked in place. Then his eyes opened. The golden light vanished. The symbols stopped spinning, and he dropped softly to the floor like a falling leaf. "You came just in time," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The storm is ready." She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. He reached toward her slowly, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Why? She finally managed. "What is this? What are you doing?" He walked past her, toward the altar. The stone cracked beneath his steps, but not from weight, from power. It shimmered beneath him, like reality struggled to hold him. "I'm opening the gate," he said. "Not to let something in, but to let something out." She followed, heart racing. "What's inside?" He turned his head slightly. "You," he said, "and every other soul that's ever worn a mask." He placed his hand on the altar, and the wall behind it began to move. Flesh-like stone peeled away to reveal a dark void. Inside, something pulsed, huge, ancient, alive. "Your people built walls to hide from judgment," he said, "and they filled the cracks with lies." She stared into the void, and it stared back. She saw a version of herself inside, taller, cooler, smiling with sharp teeth. And behind that reflection, countless more, every sin, every act of war, all floating in that prison of forgotten truths. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed, hands gripping the cold floor. "What happens if it gets out?" she whispered. The priest knelt beside her. "It already has," he said. "You've felt it, haven't you? The change, the hunger, the power." She didn't answer, because she knew it was true. The runes on her hands were now carved deeper, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She had begun to dream in the dead language. She had begun to understand. The chapel shook. Dust fell from above. The light from the sky blade outside grew brighter. "You must make a choice soon," the priest said. "Will you help me close the gate, or join what comes through it?" She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to be a monster." He placed a hand on her chest. "Then remember who you were before you forgot," he whispered. "And remember that no monster ever fears what they've become." She clutched her chest. Inside, a second heartbeat began to pound, not hers, but something waiting to be born, and above them both, the sky split open, and something stepped through. The sky didn't tear open with thunder. It opened with a whisper, a soft, ancient sound that slipped into every ear, even those of the dead. Trala stood in the broken chapel, the light behind her fading, and in front of her, the void pulsed. Slowly, no longer silent, it breathed. From the darkness came not a creature, but a shape. Vague, tall, shifting like smoke and sorrow. It had no face, only a mouth, and it smiled at her like it remembered her. She took a step back, but her foot struck the stone, and she couldn't move further. The priest stood calmly beside her, his robes now stitched with glowing runes. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Only watched the thing approach. "That's not real," she whispered. "That's not me." But deep inside, she knew it was. A reflection twisted by guilt. A version of herself that had never stopped smiling when cities burned. The shadow figure tilted its head and spoke not with words, but through her own voice, cold, cruel, certain. "They loved you when you were heartless," it said. "They followed you when you were a weapon. Why crawl now?" Trala's knees buckled. Her breath turned shaky. She pressed her hands against her head. The runes were glowing hot now, as if trying to burn the memories out. The priest stepped forward between her and the creature, his voice low, sharp. "She's not yours anymore," the shadow hissed, and the chapel walls shook. Old wooden beams split, ancient stone cracked, and from deep beneath the floor, something screamed, not a beast, not a voice, a memory. Raw, living, furious. Suddenly, she wasn't in the chapel anymore. She was back in the burning village. Human screams filled the air. Flames climbed the sky. And in her hands fire. She saw herself marching forward, smiling, leading soldiers. Laughing as she kicked open doors. Children crying. Parents dragged out. Her orders, her war. She fell to her knees again, gasping, and beside her, the priest's voice whispered, "This is not punishment. This is truth." She wanted to scream, but the words that left her mouth were not pain. They were a prayer. Old, broken, trembling, in the language she had never learned, yet knew in her bones. The light in the chapel exploded. The shadow staggered back, screeching. And for a moment, just one moment, it looked afraid. The priest reached down and lifted her gently. "You're waking up," he said. "Keep going." "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe." "You can," he said. "Because you were this darkness once. But now you have a name." He touched her chest again, and the runes on her hands surged outward, crawling up her arms, across her face, down her spine, etching her in light, until she no longer shook. She stood on her own feet. The shadow snarled. But now she stepped forward, eyes glowing, arms calm at her side. And for the first time she didn't feel fear. She felt clarity. "I was blind," she said. "But not anymore. You were my past," she said to the shadow. "But not my future." She raised her hand. The shadow charged and vanished into ash before it could reach her. The chapel fell still again. No storm, no screams. Only the sound of her breath, slow and steady. The priest turned to her with a smile. "You just confessed," he said. "In your own way." She laughed bitterly, wiping her face. "I didn't come to be saved." He nodded. "Good," he said. "Because I didn't come to save anyone. I came to remind them who they used to be." And outside, across the skies of Virex, faint lights began to flicker as if other souls, hidden deep in shadow, had also begun to remember. Night didn't fall, it collapsed, one blink, and the sky turned black. No stars, no moon, no glow, just endless, crushing dark. Trala stood atop the chapel roof, her skin still humming with the light she had unleashed. She had no idea how she'd gotten up there, but the world below was no longer the one she knew, alien. Warships lined the skies, hover tanks rolled across the hills. Mechs like steel giants stood locked in position, and every weapon was pointed straight at one target. The chapel, him. A loudspeaker crackled through the dark. A voice echoed, booming. "This is Commander Drex of the Unified Legion. You have violated Article 0. Lay down your symbols, and the girl walks free." Trala didn't move. Neither did the priest, who now stood in the center of the roof. His robes were different, stained with ancient colors, tied with glowing cords. Symbols danced around him like lazy fireflies. She whispered, "They're going to kill us." He glanced at her, calm as a still lake. "Let them try." She wanted to argue, scream, run, but deep down, part of her believed him, because she had seen what he was, and because now, so was she. The mechs fired first, twin beams of plasma, shot toward them, blinding, perfect, and disappeared, mid-air, just gone, as if swallowed by silence. The air changed, heavy, sharp, filled with electricity that wasn't natural. The priest raised a hand, and the wind obeyed. He whispered something, and the ground shook. Tralla saw one of the tanks suddenly crumple inward like paper. Another lifted into the sky, spinning like a toy. Soldiers began to scream, not from pain, but from memory. They dropped their weapons, holding their heads. Some fell to their knees, crying. Others clawed at the ground, whispering names of people long dead. What are you doing to them? She asked in awe. I'm not, he said. I only unlocked the doors. They walked into their own truths. A single ship dared to fire a missile. It never reached them. The missile stopped midair and slowly reversed course, shooting back toward the ship that fired it. The sky lit up with flame. Tralla turned to him. You're not a priest, she whispered. You're something older. He didn't smile, didn't deny it, but he looked at her. And in that look, she saw it again. Not rage, not pride, but sorrow, deep and endless. This was never meant to be a war, he said. This was a warning. Below, soldiers began fleeing. Machines stopped moving. Even the mechs knelt down like guilty beasts. The silence after was terrifying. Tralla fell to her knees, exhausted. The runes on her skin pulsed once more before fading. The light inside her calmed. And for the first time in weeks she felt empty, not hollow but ready. The priest turned away, walking down into the chapel. She followed him slowly, and deep inside the dark hall. He paused beside the cracked altar. There is one more gate, he said softly. The one inside you. She touched her chest, and felt something flicker quiet, but strong. He looked at her one last time and said, when the time comes. Don't hesitate. Then he was gone, not walking, not fading, just no longer there. And outside, across the broken skies of Virex, the silence held its breath, waiting for what she would do next. The world didn't feel like it had ended. It felt like it was waiting, as if the ground, the air, the stars above were all leaning in, holding still, listening for one last decision. Tralla stood alone in the center of the chapel. The roof was gone now, ripped open during the battle, and through it, the sky blinked slowly, one massive eye opening above her. Not a god, not a machine, but something watching, patient, ancient, familiar. She was no longer the girl who once spied from the shadows, no longer the weapon of war trained to kill without questions. She had seen herself, every version, every memory, every lie, and now there was only one thing left to do. The final gate stood behind the altar. It pulsed like a heartbeat, hers, but louder. The priest's words echoed in her ears. Don't hesitate. She stepped forward, barefoot now. The chapel floor warmed beneath her feet. Each step made the air ripple. Each breath felt heavier. The runes on her body began to glow again, this time in rhythm, like a song rising from deep within her bones. Then, without warning, a voice spoke, not behind her, not beside her, but from the gate itself. You are not ready, it said. You have remembered, but not chosen. She didn't flinch. She raised her hand, glowing with soft golden light. I choose, she said, her voice steady, to end what was never meant to begin. The gate shuddered, and from its heart, a figure stepped out, her but not her, a mirror born of pain, pride, and power. The other Tralla stood tall, wearing golden armor, eyes burning like twin stars. You gave up your strength, she hissed. You could have ruled them all. I don't want to rule, Tralla replied. I want to live. The two stared at each other, no weapons drawn, but the space between them trembled like a bowstring pulled tight. The other raised her hand and light flashed. Tralla was thrown back, crashing into the altar, blood on her lips, breath stolen from her lungs. The other stepped forward. You forgot what it felt like to win, she said. To be feared, obeyed, worshipped. Tralla crawled to her knees, looked at the broken stone, the ruined chapel, the empty sky above, and remembered the priest's face, not glowing, not winged, but kind, tired, human. She closed her eyes and whispered, I remember what it felt like to be forgiven, The runes on her skin exploded with light. White fire surged through her. Not burning but cleansing. The other screamed as the glow struck her, trying to hold form. But cracks appeared across her armor, and then she shattered. Not violently, but like dust dissolving in warm rain. The gate pulsed once, twice, and then went dark. A soft hum faded, and with it, the weight lifted. The storm above cleared. The chapel, though broken, felt calm again. And in that silence something new arrived. A small child peeked through the broken door, human, wide-eyed, wearing torn clothes and no shoes. "Miss?" he asked. "Is it over?" Trala turned to him, smiled softly, and held out her hand. "Yes," she said. "But it's just beginning." The child stepped inside. Behind him came others, curious, cautious, alive, human and alien alike. Drawn by the light that once terrified them, Trala stood and faced them all. Not as a warrior, not as a shadow, but as a bridge between what was and what could be, and somewhere far away, in a place without name. The priest sat beneath a tree, eyes closed, smiling faintly. "She chose well," he whispered, then vanished, like a story finished, but never forgotten. The nightmare had ended, not in war, but in a single choice made by a girl who remembered who she really was.